Hello everyone, my name is Solvashas and welcome to episode number 25 of Inflight. Wow, 25 episodes, that's crazy. I'm really excited to get into today's episode because we have two amazing guests on today. But we'll get into that in a moment because I am really excited to share with you guys that today's episode is sponsored by Orbx. Some of you guys know who Orbx are and some of you don't. But in case you don't, Orbx are developers of really great scenery, airports, and add-ons for all major flight simulation platforms. So that's P3D, X-Plane, and Microsoft Flight Simulator. I've done a few reviews of their Microsoft Flight Simulator products, so I've looked at them, but my main experience comes from the products that they have made for X-Plane, and that includes True Earth and a few other sceneries here and there. And I wanted to touch on True Earth really quickly, because if you're unfamiliar with True Earth, it's a really great product. They have taken ortho imagery and put it into X-Plane, color corrected it, all of that, and made it for different regions. So there's True Earth Washington, there's True Earth NorCal, and True Earth SoCal, which are two really great products. I personally have True Earth SoCal, and I lived in SoCal for quite a while, and they did a fantastic job with it. Now, they might not have wildfires in there. I'm really sorry if you live in California, by the way, and you are experiencing the wildfires. Please stay safe and stay healthy. But everything else is extremely accurate, and I really feel like I'm in California whenever I'm in True Earth SoCal, and that means a lot to me as somebody who was born there. So that's just a taste of one of the products that they have, and I'm really excited they are able to sponsor today's episode. And if you would like to look at any other Orbx products, maybe check out True Earth SoCal. I would highly recommend doing it, and you can check out these products at orbxdirect.com. That's orbxdirect.com. orbxdirect.com. Really great developers, make some great sceneries, some great airports, all of that. And I'm really happy that they are sponsoring today's episode. On today's episode of the podcast, we are finally able to speak to Jorg and Sebastian. Jorg is the lead developer for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Sebastian is the CEO of Asobo. So, two really important people in making Microsoft Flight Simulator possible. I had a really great talk with them. It was really nice to catch up with them after Microsoft Flight Simulator had been released, because we actually got to hear what their feelings are about how the simulator has done and things that they wish that they can do in the future, things that they want to continue to do, and things that they want to stop doing that they have done for the simulator's release. And it was really great to hear all those perspectives, and I was really happy to have them on the show. They're great people, really fun to talk to, really smart and on it, and it made for a great conversation. Unfortunately, Norm couldn't join us because we did have a tight schedule and all of our schedules didn't line up. I was able to make some room in my schedule, but Norm was unfortunately not. So back to the old Inflight days where Sol was the only host for this episode at least, but Norm will be joining us in future episodes. Don't you worry about that. Regardless, I'm really excited to get into this episode. Had a great conversation with them, as I said. Without further ado, I present to you Jorg and Sebastian.
Well, let's get started then. So Jorg and Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you guys have a really busy schedule, so I appreciate you guys taking the time. And I'm sorry that you couldn't meet Norm, my co-host. Unfortunately, timing for him didn't work out as much. But thank you so much for joining us. How are you two doing today? How has work been since the release of the simulator?
Very busy.
Very busy, just doing bug fixes and all of that, or just dealing with the craziness of release?
A little bit of bug fixing, a lot of reading forum feedback videos, comments, and starting to address requests and or issues. A lot of optimization, lot of optimization, and yeah, generally work.
Yeah,
it's been awesome since launch. I mean, you know, we have such great feedback from the press, from the community. It's been it's been a whirlwind,
Yeah.
And then some people had some install issues, so we immediately jumped on those to make sure that everybody has a good time. So it's been super cool. And then I've been spending quite a bit of time with third-party creators because they're all eager to get into our in-sim marketplace, and we're working on that fast and furiously. And it's like there's so many cool planes coming. I keep telling Seth, like, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna buy that. So it's been awesome.
That's awesome. So let's actually take it back a bit. So we obviously release has gone really great. I'm really happy for you guys. I love the simulator. You guys have done a terrific job. Let's go all the way back and let's learn a little bit more about you two. So what is your background? How did Microsoft Flight Simulator land in your lap, and how has the process been of developing it and now releasing it?
Background. So I'm coming from an engineering background. I mean, way back. I used to be, the only programmer on video games when it was just one programmer, right? In like early 90s, everything was assembly. There was whatever. When my first game, I had I think it was PC 512K memory. So yeah, 8068, all assembly. So yeah, and so today I specialize myself on simulation physics, world rendering, management, like a little bit of everything, but I tend to leave stuff out. So on Flight Simulator more specifically, I worked a lot on the aerodynamics, simulation of the planes, any sort of systems or collisions or suspensions, and a lot on the world, rendering, a little bit on clouds, a little bit on everything. I help out whenever there's something where people need help.
And on top of that, Seb is the CEO of Asobo.
Yeah,
just on the side, that thing.
That's evening work.
I mean, me, I could speak to it really briefly. I started at the same time roughly that Seb did, early 90s, at a company called Orbx Systems. But so I was a designer then, and then I turned into a producer. I worked on something called Crusader, and then I made a game called Freelancer for Microsoft. So it was a space game. And then in 2006 or so, I moved up to Seattle and went into publishing, and which is the first games I worked on. I worked with Casey on Mass Effect and with Remedy on Alan Wake, and then I worked on Kinect games. That's where I actually met Seb about 12 years ago or so now. I was looking for great developers who wanted to take on some new challenges. Kinect was new and like fascinating, and that's who I met, right, when I visited Bordeaux. Super smart, technically savvy, generally very interested people who wanted to explore some new things. And so we made a game together called Kinect Rush. It's basically a Pixar movie tie-in game. It's really fun. I can still play it on Game Pass. Oh yeah. And then we spent a few years on that. Then we went over to HoloLens, again, worked with Seb and his team and others, but like mostly with Seb and team actually, and did a bunch of innovations there. And that's actually probably what is the most straight line to lead us to Flight Sim, because we worked on something called Holo Tour. And the idea with Holo Tour was you basically put your headset on, and you could teleport around the planet. That was the idea. We only did 3 locations. So we had like Rome and San Francisco, and then with Asobo, we worked on Machu Picchu. And that was super interesting because it's it's like these rolling hills in Peru, and it was amazing. And the photorealism of it all, it felt just right? I've never been to Peru, so we put the helmet on, looked around, it sounded right, it looked right, and the thought then came, what if we would do that on a global scale? And and at some point, that I remember in 2015, I called Seb like somewhere, I don't know, in November or something. I said, hey, what about, let's try Flight Sim? And then we send them like the Bing Maps, like one of the great services that Microsoft has, basically the entire Earth. And we sent Asobo the map for Seattle, which I think, if memory serves, it was like 25 gig or something, right? Of like a what we call photogrammetry city. And then Seb and a few other guys jumped in, got it to work in the engine, put a little Cessna 172 on top of it and flew around, and it already, that was early 16. It already felt good then, but it was the beginning of a pretty long journey because like these simulators are complex as hell, and anyways, so here we are. So that's the origin.
That's really cool. So coming back from a gaming background and going more into a simulator background. Okay, so I feel you guys with that. So let's see. You came from a gaming background. You went to a flight simulation background. There's obviously a lot of things that are really similar between the two, but as I'm sure you are becoming more and more aware, especially after the simulator has been released, simulation, even though it does require a lot of game development skills, is also very different. So when you were making the simulator, what were some takeaways that you took from the competition that you guys have now, that you have made, and what were your goals? Did you guys look at P3D and X-Plane and say, we love that they do this, we hate that they do this, and we want to do that better? Or did you guys go into it with a completely open mindset, like you were creating an entirely new game and competition was just not in your minds at all?
I'll give you my angle first, I think. So I think when you look at, I don't know if you can see me, but when you look behind me, there's every box of flight sim ever, right? And it's it's been 38 years now. And the one thing that's very common, the one thread that's common is Microsoft Flight Simulator always pushed what was possible on a PC at the time of its release.
Right.
And then it also, the last 5 won like Best Simulator of the Year awards. So when we started, we're like, wow, if we really want to make like a new entry, and we didn't end up calling it Flight Sim 11, but like the next new entry, we knew we had to do the same. We had to do something that can at least be nominated or something to be Best Simulator of the Year. And that means a lot. And we needed to take some massive step forward. And so we had the world, like the stuff I was just talking about, and that was clearly a step forward, but it actually uses the cloud in a different way from maybe other people. Like, we're not just doing storage, we're also doing compute and those types of things. It's interesting. But that doesn't end there. That's actually just the beginning. It's a flight simulator. So you need like the air masses and the weather and the whole atmospherics need to be redone. And then the flight model has to be rewritten. And given that we knew that we were going to go truly innovate and to push the genre forward, I certainly didn't spend much time. Like we had FSX, that was a great starting point.
Right.
We didn't look at Prepared 3D, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I knew we had licensed it. Honestly, like, people had all kinds of theories and what we would do to Prepare 3D. And like, we never even looked at it. And then X-Plane, I tried it, but it was, I wasn't a core simmer when we started. I'm probably still not a core simmer, but I'm much more appreciative of sims, and I'm obviously playing a lot, simming a lot. X-Plane was just not, it wasn't for me, it wasn't accessible enough. It was actually what kind of had kept me away probably from simming in a real, as a hobby.
Right.
So we just built on, we sent the code base for FSX over to Asobo, and maybe Seb, you take it from there and talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So myself, same thing, right? I had a background of gaming, but I was always focused on simulation. So one game we did 13 years ago was Fuel. So I wrote the world engine and the simulation of the cars and trucks, and so physics was really my preferred I would say domain in games. But I've done some plain physics before for game modes and stuff like this, but I really never looked at it more than that. And the first thing we did is say, okay, so we looked at a lot of course at forums and basically the whole history at the FSX code base. But also I think we tried to take advantage of one thing, which is, okay, we're new, let's also take advantage of that. And we threw ourselves full as much as you really can into real world flying. And we went to the airport. Okay, Aero Club, where can we look at planes? Okay, we want to become pilots. How do you do that? And we started taking flying lessons, and with a fully open and new eye, and really looked at everything. How do the planes work? And discussed with all the instructors, had different instructors, and tried to really get a feel of what is flying, get a real world and real pilot sort of perspective. And also at the same time, we really looked at the code base of FSX, what was great, what was missing. There has been many years between FSX and today. What is the new things we can do? And obviously there was the new technologies available, like big data, the cloud, Azure, machine learning, but also a lot more computing power, much better graphics card. So we really looked at what is possible. What is real flying all about? We took tons of videos and photos and reference, and we looked at FSX, and I think it's sort of this. I think there was the first year was a lot of trying to find what the community wanted and looking at forums and data. Look at what real flying really is to understand where are we going, right? We're trying to simulate flight and planes and aviation. And what is real aviation? What does the real world look like? So this was sort of the endpoint. Starting point was really FSX and community feedback. Endpoint is the real world, and the tools we had was technology and all the new stuff which is available to us. And so I think this is how the plan. And then basically there was a lot of design work. And okay, where do we start? Because we knew we couldn't do everything, right? We can't do 100% of real world simulation of everything. So we had to start somewhere.
So
Yeah.
is that
Maybe the one thing I want to add, Sol, is like so when we say, I actually would say certainly before I ever called Seb,
yeah.
I spent a whole bunch of time. I actually talked to Dovetail because they had the FSX license back in the day. I looked at there were a bunch of surveys done, both by Navigraph and by other people. We did some surveys, and we really had a good idea what people were looking for. And ultimately, given that it's a digital hobby, we always saw ourselves as the enablers of the hobby. Like it really was, what do they want? Like what's working right now? What's not working so well? What are the dreams they have? And it was pretty clear they wanted, the core things were pretty straightforward. It was hey, could we please have something that looks as good as Forza? Actually, games came up a lot. They said, why is our hobby not looking as good as some other stuff? What is up with this?
Right,
and the second thing was, please make something that runs on modern machines and that actually uses multi-threading and actually uses the modern graphic card features. And we're like, well, we can do that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that really popped was that I actually wrote it down back in 2015. Like the number one thing that came up sort of in the subtext was global VFR was a thing. People wanted it forever, right? And in order to do that, just look outside the window to orient yourself. You actually had to have the world. So the impetus came from what the community wanted. And we basically did wherever it took us, honestly. And then it was great for the first 3 years because then Seb actually traveled through the world to talk to all the plane manufacturers, and we learned about weather and met weather scientists and all those types of things. And then, so we got to really good basis by the time we announced last summer, like at E3 last year. And then we opened up right to the alpha, and it's been just fantastic. I can't tell you how awesome it's been to be exposed to tens of thousands of people with like deep insight into so many subject matters, right? They wrote us a ton of feedback, and they were so gracious with their time.
Yeah.
And that I think that time was so important, like that we spend enough time in the alpha to really understand what they want. And the stories that they have told us, right? Hey, I was flying with my Baron this weekend and it felt different, and I'm gonna write the feedback. It was great. Like you can't do that, right? As a developer, like we can't. I mean, Seb is now a pilot, right? At least the theory part, I think, is done, right? I mean, we have other people who know how to fly, but nobody knows how to fly 30 planes on anywhere from like a 152 to a 787-10. I mean, there's no such person, right? So having that engagement, just priceless. And it's unique, right? In my 25 years of making games, I've never had this before, and it's awesome.
So you guys were talking about, you had these questions. You had, where is flying going? What is real aviation? And how your endpoint was the real world and global VFR. And another thing that you pointed out, Jorg, too, is that you were looking at things and you were noticing just how difficult it was to get into this hobby. And are you noticing at all that there are people, because of how easy you have made Microsoft Flight Simulator, there are new people who are entering the hobby and really loving flight simming because of you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's actually probably my greatest delight. Like honestly, like press and stuff is great and all, but it's when people send me pictures of their houses with their 11-year-old daughter enthralled in this experience exploring the Earth. Holy shit! Like, what a moment that is. Because frankly, when we started, like, here's a stat that was a little bit interesting: 98% of the flight sim audience was male.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, games tend to lean there a little bit, but I've never ever seen a number like that before. So, and then honestly, like, what's interesting, as we went on our journey, right, and met lots of people online and in person, it's just so fascinating how many people who are fell in love with aviation through Microsoft Flight Simulator. Like, and it's I would say at least 50% of the pilots, probably more, that are flying around today will tell you that their first love was in the simulation on their PC, and then at whatever age, right? And I think it was always sort of the secret hope that we can do something that's accessible enough and honestly celebrates the beauty of it all, because there's beauty in flying and there's beauty in the world, that we can inspire like a new generation of aviators and broader, like, you know, embrace, because it's such a great hobby if you really get into it. It's, you know, so that's the hope. That's my hope anyways, and I see some evidence that that's happening.
So for both of you, you just said inspire a new generation of aviators. And while that's obviously extremely important, the entire world, whether you're speaking about gaming, just technology in general, has never seen Bing Maps or just any sort of photogrammetry really brought into something that you can play and something that you can use. You know, you see it in Google Maps and you take it for granted, or Bing Maps or whatever, because it's just there and it's cool eye candy every once in a while. So you're talking about inspiring a new generation of aviators. For you two, people who have been inside of the gaming community and also the technology community for such a long time, do you think that what you guys are doing now is also going to inspire a new generation of games as well?
Seb, you should go first. I've been speaking too much. I feel bad.
I mean, there's definitely innovations that we use, like, for example, Azure, which I think it is Azure and using the machine and not just storage, right? Not just having petabytes of data there, but also using compute power of Azure to generate the world. I think it's something for I mean, streaming is an old word in gaming technology. It just means you have a bigger level on the hard drive or on the DVD than you have in RAM. And when you run around with your character or drive around with your car, we load what is coming later into RAM from a disk or from wherever, right? And streaming from the internet in the past has always been video, right? We stream some movie, we render some game in the cloud and then stream the video. But here in Flight Simulator, we're streaming data. We're streaming the level, and the level is the planet. And because we have Azure, we can actually store something as big as the planet. And because we have Azure, we can actually process something as big as the planet upfront, right? To actually have that much data actually makes sense. And this is something I think is probably gonna, I haven't seen that in the industry at all. And I think it may open doors of future games where the worlds are gonna be super big and the data is actually gonna be online and not on a DVD or not on a hard drive. I think also something we try to do is, I mean, when we went flying, the first thing that shocked me is really that, this is so awesome. Everybody needs to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, it is absolutely crazy awesome, and not that hard, right? The very first flight lesson, the instructor makes it easy for you, and it feels like almost like anybody could fly, and it's awesome. So people really need to get and do this. And what we saw is that the planet is awesome, but also the whole atmosphere and clouds and lighting and morning and the whole way the world looks, because you see it in the airplane, you see it from the ground when you take off, and then from 100 feet, 500 feet, 2,000 feet, you see it from so many different angles, which you are not used to, right? You're always seeing the world from the ground otherwise. Right. And I think the fact that we can now simulate the world rendering at all the different times seamlessly, everything, I think this is also something which I think we're going to get much more believable worlds in the future, and bigger, believable, and it opens many doors.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you I think this is a moment, and honestly, I don't know sometimes 2020 hindsight, right? I mean, I remember saying, wow, there's so much data, we need to go stream it, because it was like 1.7 million DVDs worth of data. Okay, we need to go stream it. But I think what actually, so storage and delivery was also always a thing, and Bing and Azure help us a lot. I think the fact that Azure has such great infrastructure that we can get it at low latency, because that's important, right? You need to get to low latency to any endpoint. And I think there's now enough data centers across the planet that we can actually go do that. And that's new. That didn't exist 3 years ago. It didn't even exist when we started. It was a lot more limited geographically. So I think that's key. And I think in general, offloading more, like I'm starting to think, really my mental model is Azure is the biggest computer on the planet. Like that's my mental model. And the more we can offload to it, the less powerful your client needs to be.
Right.
Really. And I'm super curious. Oftentimes people look at the world and they're like, oh my God, it's so pretty. Like, yeah. So I think of the world, frankly, in 3 different phases, and I'll give them to you real quick. The first one is the static world, right? It's literally the geometry of the world. Cool. We got that from Bing, and lots of augmentation and smart machine learning and all that stuff looks great. Then there is the dynamic world, which is the atmospherics, the time of day, things like seasons. That's to me the dynamic world, right? The world is not a static place. And we've gotten very far, not done, but quite far. And then there's what I call the living world, which I think is another layer. And that's where maybe games come in a little bit more. And I am, Seb always looks at me funny when I say these things, but I'm like, hey, there is no reason in my mind that we can't have the AI for 1 million caribou running in the cloud, because it's not that latency dependent, right? You can totally do it. Like, can we render like 1 million animals? Sure. Can we have them run around intelligently through the hills, like from Canada down or something? Yes, we can. So I think AI is one of those things, I think as we are really now approaching photorealism as an industry, and I think frankly, once you've approached photorealism, people tend to get more creative and start to become more artistic, right? But we're sort of in the photoreal pocket here with Flight Sim. I think making the world feel more and more alive with additional things that are frankly out there, it's what the world is. I think we can do more, and I think that will also cross over into other games and frankly, a lot of other things beyond games.
Right. Something that really stood out to me that you just mentioned there was, by having all of these, by advancing the world of streaming things, you're also making gaming more accessible to other people. So then it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where you were talking about the 98% male thing. And then you were also talking about how, since you've made flight simming so easy, it also brings us in this entirely new audience. But you're also going to be bringing in more people as well, because the more that you stream, even people who have wanted to get into flight sim their entire lives but simply can't afford a rig are now able to get into it as well. That's really awesome.
I'm currently working on a video with the Asobo team that is Africa. I've been doing this. It's called Around the World series, right? So we did 2 episodes. The next one's going to be Africa, and there's 1 billion people in Africa,
right?
And guess what? A lot of them have phones. Like, maybe not all the phones we need and stuff, but that's just a matter of time.
Right.
But I am so excited that we'll be able to really entertain the planet, right? It used to be, you needed to have sufficient funds to buy yourself a, pretty good computer or like the latest Xbox and stuff. And I think things like xCloud makes this really accessible beyond, and I think that's going to be so great. Like, I think it's going to liberalize who we can reach, and it's going to also diversify what we can say and who we say it to.
Right, absolutely. So we've spoken a lot about the simulator as a whole, and I wanted to focus on something for our interview that I absolutely love about your simulator. So this is coming from a biased person who's probably going to eat up anything that you guys tell me about it. But also something that I've heard a lot of my colleagues and other people in the community say, and that's lighting. You guys have done a really terrific job with lighting, so congratulations. That's something that simulators have really lacked for a while, and you guys have killed it. So thank you for that. What was the process for getting the lighting engine into the simulator? Because obviously it's something that's dynamic, because as you enter certain altitudes, the lighting changes and the atmosphere changes. how did you go about that, and what inspired you to make that such a? Personally, I feel like it's at the forefront of the simulator. The lighting is the first thing you see, as of course the photogrammetry is in there as well. But what inspired you to make that something so important?
So I think so. Lighting, there's several reasons actually. Before even we came into this, lighting has always been what makes a game shine or ugly.
Right.
You take the same. You can take a perfect 3D scene. If it's badly lit, it doesn't look good. And great lighting can make anything look good. I remember the very first time. Oh my God, maybe 20 years ago, we had Radiosity in our engine.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just a stupid flat room with a chair and a table. And I thought, oh, this looks almost real. How great does it look, right? It just looks all painted white. There was not even a texture. But great lighting makes everything look great. But when I took my first flying lessons, I realized how important it actually is. Right. I remember very often we go flying in the morning. Because in our area, so we have a very high temperature amplitude. So in the morning, it's like 10 degrees and calm air, not a lot of turbulence. If you go flying in the evening, they call it the washing machine, right? That's how much turbulence there is because it's 35 degrees and there's forest field, and so it goes up and down and up and down. It's crazy. Yeah. And so very early in the morning, right when the sun just rises, you fly west, you can see. You fly east, you can't see anything. And I remember first navigation to Libourne airport, and the instructor, so that's how they test you, right? You fly, and he checks if you know where you are, and he says, "Yeah, you can see the runway." And I said, "No." He said, "No, you can't see the runway." And I said, "No, I can't." And actually, I did a mistake. I was wearing polarized sunglasses, and I couldn't. The sunway was actually reflecting the sun, the runway, and he could see it. I couldn't see it, so. He said, take off your sunglasses. And then all of a sudden, it was like a sparkling white line on the ground at the horizon, and it was the runway. And you realize just how important lighting is. And the fact that in one direction, you can almost see 200 kilometers far away. On the other way, you can maybe see 5 kilometers because there's just this sun halo, which is lighting up everything. And it is. I think it is key to make stuff look good. But I think it's also key to flying, and different moments in the day when you prepare your flight. I use the software all the time now for every navigation I do. I always set the time of day and everything because it can totally change a flight. It can totally change a flight when you have the sun behind you, on the left, in the front, if there's clouds or not, and it's super important.
Yeah, I would say that there was I remember the moment in time where we started sending each other pictures. Yeah, like we were flying around the world. Like in airliners and whatnot, right? Or like personal planes, but like also in airliners, we took photographs from everywhere. Remember, Seb? We had all these wing shots, and then we made the same shot in the sim. And we said, "Can you tell it apart?" It was so much fun, and because ultimately, I think we obviously studied airplanes a lot and how they look. So it's all the things that Seb said about the real world flying. Totally true and super important. But we also looked at make the world look right, make the whole thing feel right. And we used photo references all the time. And we really started to obsess on, does it look, can you tell it apart? Yes or no? Does it match? Yes or no? And I think lighting is such an integral part of making that work at different times of day, because photographs are taken, oftentimes at golden hour or whatnot. So it's, I think it was both the necessity to get the flying correct and also the desire to make something that really matches the real world as much as we can. So that's why it's a fully integrated light scattering system. It's all physically accurate, right? If we talked about this before, the rainbows, we're not putting rainbows in, they just appear because it's the actual light refraction on the particles. So yes, and so it was just in the pursuit of making it really better and better and better. I think we got closer and closer. Yeah.
This is really something which is enabled by modern GPUs. I mean, getting the exact, so everything in the simulator is physically correct. Everything, all the formulas is all physically based, but some of the calculations require a lot of compute power. And modern GPUs enable this. So there's a whole bunch of tricks to actually get this working, right? So I don't, for example, temporal stuff. I don't know if you heard about this, but a lot of the stuff is distributed over sometimes 1632 frames, and in the end you get the result because it's just so heavy computation that you can't do it in one frame. And modern GPUs allow this, and it's great because you can now actually really do all the exact simulation that are required, especially in clouds. Clouds are incredibly complex to simulate, and this is enabled because of all the stuff we can do now on modern GPUs.
But what's great, Sol, is like, and it's for me, it's almost the best thing about the product. Like we are literally just at the beginning. Like we literally say, launch is the beginning. Like we have conversations because you can go, once you're in an area and it looks good, it's so easy to hyper obsess.
Yeah.
we had this call, we had this shot, and like it was somewhere in the Bretagne or something, or Normandy, Bretagne, and there was with Saint Michel, and we looked at the grass waving in the wind, and it was Saint Michel, and this holy thing was virtual. And what did I bring up? Hey, so can we get like butterflies and insects in there? And I remember the devs are like, Jorg, are you serious? Or like, we look at the sky and it looks great. And I'm like, hey, Seb, the Northern Lights, man, the Northern Lights are so beautiful. And da-da-da. He's like, yes, we're going to get to it. Just wait. Yeah. It's a bunch of work. But I think we'll obviously push it further and further. Like can't wait.
So are you kind of alluding to the fact that you guys will sit down, you'll have meetings, you'll look at things, you'll be like, this is incredible, but we can do this one thing, and not a single idea is shut down? Or do you occasionally have ideas and you're like, that we really cannot do that?
In my opinion, we actually, and maybe that's a problem, but we never say really no to something. We say it's just a question of when. So we're trying to prioritize. Like we actually just today, there's an email chain going around like, what have we seen in the forums? Because we're going to put a new feedback snapshot up tomorrow to capture what the community really is saying. And we're not really. This is not a opinion-based thing. We're trying to gather data, and we're just going to say, here are the most important things the community wants. And it's like, okay, well, that is definitely defining quite a bit of what we're going to be doing. There's always ideas, right? But I don't think, Seb, I don't know if you feel that same way, that we say, nah, we're never going to do that, because we think of it as hey, there's 10 more years to go. It's just a question of when are we going to tackle this?
Yeah, and sometimes when you feel that something is really, really important, I think we spend a little bit more time on how can we get this done faster, because there's always a first estimation, say, oh my God, this is going to take us 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then if you understand the problem more and what is really the problem, what do people really want, what is really the issue, sometimes you find ways to get something quicker. And so, stuff is moving a lot, and I don't think any door is closed.
That was the thing we had right coming out of E3. The two things we heard, was number 1 and 2, and then there's a large gap was VR and seasons.
Right.
And VR, we immediately reacted. Right, we had sort of deprioritized it for a variety of reasons. We actually had it early on, then we just stopped working on it. And then the community, there was so much that people said, you've got to have VR in this. Right? And we're like, oh, okay. That's why we want feedback, right? So we immediately put a team together, and it's almost done, and it's amazing. And then seasons is interesting in that it's actually kind of complicated when you do it really well, because you can get into, like what I just said, you can get into all the details. Like, can you do snow accumulation? Sure.
Yeah.
But then, do you need slow plows on the airports?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need people run around in winter clothes? Like, to do it right, you need to do it right. And so Seb did actually. He basically did a little Seb magic, and we got the snow in basically for right around Christmas, and then we said, should we do it for Christmas and should we do it for New Year's? And we did it for New Year's. So we put a video out called Snow, honestly, January 1st. Yes. Just to acknowledge we heard you guys. Like, I fully understood seasons are important, and but we knew the complexity was going to be significant. So we got it's kind of to the point that Seb just made. The most important thing, when you listen to the stories that people talked about seasons, it was actually mostly about snow. It was people from Norway that said, please don't make me fly to Norway in the winter and it's green. Like, right. that you're not even doing my country anymore. So like, that's a fair point. So that is why we pushed snow first, and then are there other seasonal things that we should be doing or want to be doing? Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, snow is a really, really, really big part. So you guys, we've spoken a lot about during this interview about everything that you guys have done, and I imagine that creating a flight simulator, although you, Asobo, and you, Jorg, have a lot of experience making games just overall, it's a completely new, there's a completely new structure to it. So you need to design processes that are different than other processes that you have done before. And one thing that has become really clear to me, and I'm not a developer myself, so I don't know a ton about this, but it's the idea that third-party developers have, until this point, had a really, really different way of developing things and a really different way of understanding how to interact with flight simulators. Because, as you pointed out earlier, older flight simulators are not, they're not modern. They're not using multi-threading and stuff like that. So the processes for that are very different. So when you guys are working with third-party developers, what's your end goal with them, and how are you working with them to have them understand your new structure, and how has it been communicating with kind of an old structure and bringing it into a new structure?
All right, I'll start. Maybe there's lots to be said on this. So the first thing is, look, so I used to be a game designer guy, right? So I can tell you, as a game designer guy, the thing that you want is great tools, because whatever is in your head or in your heart, good tools enable you to bring that to your audience faster, better. You can do other things, more things. So tools was a focus pretty early on to have an SDK, and I don't think it's ever been done to have an SDK on launch day. Typically, those things were sort of like you launch and then you sort of grab up your tools, and at some point or another you put them out and stuff. That's not what we did. Actually, we started to have serious SDK discussions right after we launched, and it's actually the first thing I did. Right after E3, literally, I flew home from LA, and the very next day, it's the day when I started with some other folks here at Microsoft first, calling third parties, like the famous ones. There's lots of them, honestly. And we basically said, hey, don't know if you watch our video. We want to work with you, and we want to make sure that this is your platform, and that you have what you need, and that you can bring your creativity to the best of your abilities, right? So let's just talk. And so we created some forums for third parties, and we let people into the SDK early on to give us feedback. And I think it's been really great. At some point you get under, just like any development, you have to make trade-offs, right? Like, so we at some point we probably focused more on finishing the sim for the end consumer than finishing the SDK. Like, so the SDK is not finished, and in some ways tools are never really truly finished. But we prioritize certain things. Like we talked to some, and they were very gracious. We talked to some we thought of some of the best, for example, aircraft and airport developers in the world, and we asked them, hey, let's work together, and they sent us samples of their best stuff. And we deconstructed some of how they did it and what they needed for it, and got into this dialogue. And with airports, I think we're in a really good space now, and you can see that, right? There's tons of airports coming out, like almost every day somebody announces some airport. It's not a big secret. We worked with Fernando over at Coronado, super nice guy, and they have like 100 aircraft or something. So we tried to help them as much as we could. Seb personally did, just to see what problems they run into, And then we also worked with Aerosoft, and they just, I don't know if you saw that, Martis just gave a presentation the other day, because they were our retail partner in Europe, and then also super nice people, quite frankly, and super, like, they've been in this genre for like 30 years, and they basically started the CRJ very early on, which is a pretty sophisticated plane, and that was another sample that we work with, and still are working with them on to make sure it lights up. And I know their target is to bring it out this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the model, right? We try to find common ground, listen carefully, just like we did listen to the community. We listened to the creator community. And the only thing that has been a little bit, and Seb is much more knowledgeable, so I'll be quiet here in a second, is there was a lot of hacking going on. Like the past wasn't super well supported, so people just made do. And
Right.
they do some stuff like the stories of just to get like the height check of a plane, they copy like this gigabytes worth of terrain data around everywhere. Like it's kind of insane. Like when you really think about it, like it's not what you want to be doing. So I think cleaning all that up, because there was an interoperability problem with add-ons. You bought it, and it's fine for the core hobbyists because they're used to it, right? They go to a website, they drag stuff into folders, they kind of understand that stuff doesn't really work with each other. It's all that well, and for them it's okay. But when we go over and we find a wider audience, people who are not simmers and they're not used to doing all this stuff, and they don't build their own PCs and those types of things, you need to be a lot more buttoned up in a way. You need to make sure that things work together and it's protected. So that's why we took certain technical steps and said, please take it from here. Because
Right.
Yeah. So I think we there was a few principles that we based the development on. So first rule was to say, okay, let's use the same. Let's basically use the SDK ourselves. So we built the sim with the same tools than the tools that we make available. And whether it's airports or all the tools, I don't know the way we make aircraft and all that stuff. And then when we opened up, I think early this year, people had a look at the SDK, and then we get more feedback. And we said, okay, now let's develop all the tools, because basically what happened is that people out there don't make their content necessarily the way we actually did it for the sim. And so, for example, for the airport, we delivered all the tools that we were using, but people were doing other stuff. And so then we had a team. I think it's a fairly big team. I think it's one of our biggest team I think this and cockpits. So SDK was at some point over 10 people. They added tools to the sim that third party were requiring that we were not actually using. For example, on airports. We have tools, right? There's an airport video which shows how that works. But what we didn't have is a system to actually replace the satellite photography that we were getting from Bing, because we were saying, okay, we have our satellite images from Bing. Let's just use these, right? But airport creators, they may have their own photos, right? They want to put on the ground. So we actually had a tool to actually replace a photo that was existing, but it was super clunky. We didn't have something which was super industrialized where you could just say, okay, I want to replace this giant area and it has to be 2 clicks. So we had to develop a new tool that actually was able to stream and basically use alternative ground data and so on, right? And it's the same for
the dam is the same.
It's the same for planes,
basically.
Yeah, so for planes, we do our planes a lot of, I mean, if you look at the forums, they already found it. There's a lot of JavaScript. There's a lot of tools that we use. And when we got the first planes delivered I think it was somewhere end of 2019, we saw, oh my God, they're doing a lot of C++ native. And so we can't do C++ native because this is like the opposite of interoperability and security. and you can put a virus in there. It's super hacky. So we added a C++ language to the sim, and so that is working now. And now we're working on all the tools like debuggers. It's pretty complex, right? To get something like this to work, we have to have a full programming language suite now. And so this just works for maybe a few weeks now. And now we're focusing on optimizing, getting the flow faster so that people, and this is, I mean, it's also general optimization of the sim, right? One of the biggest focus right now is optimization and loading times, for example. So when people work on an aircraft, if the loading time is 5 minutes, or if the loading time is 1 minute, well, it changes a lot of things, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're focusing now, is making, I think they have all the tools now to work, but some of them are super slow and inefficient. And so our focus now is make them as efficient as we can.
Amazing. So one thing, I think it was Jorg that you mentioned earlier, you said you're the enabler of a hobby. And I completely agree with that, that you guys have really enabled a hobby by making a really accessible simulator. And something that has been echoing throughout this entire interview, and I would also say throughout other interviews that I have watched you guys take part of, is that you guys really care about the community and you really care about listening to other people. And you guys have done a tremendous job at upholding that so far and really listening to what people have to say. How do you keep track of all of that?
It's humans. It's very simple. Like sometimes, like honestly, when we started, I remember the first time I called people, they were almost terrified because it's Microsoft calling. And Microsoft is like this, this big company, and it seems like this overwhelming thing. It's just us. Yeah. And all we really do is we're trying to do a good job, right? We understand there's a group of people who love this, and it's literally the main, outside of living and working, it's their main pursuit. And that comes, you have to be super humble. And that's how I feel. And I know Seb, I mean, that's what honestly is one of the reasons why I love Asobo so much. It really is, because there's no arrogance in that studio at all. And that's so important. Like there are some people that they're creators and they're in their own head, right? They make stuff for themselves instead of for other people. We make stuff for the people. Like that is number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, right? That is our priority. We make stuff because people want it, not because we want it. It's not about us. And but really I have, like, as I'm looking through the email, like about a third of my email again is third-party developers writing me stuff. Like sometimes they send me pictures, sometimes they send me problems, sometimes they send me ideas, and and it's just conversations. And as long as they feel like they have an honest partner on the other side, they trust you, and trust is earned. And I think I know we will all do the best we possibly can to keep the trust, because I think they've given us the trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, and I know you two are very busy, so I want to make sure that I get you guys out on time so that you can continue to do
I really like this dialogue. Like, and honestly, like Seb and I, it's been burning on us a little bit, this whole third party thing, because we're really just trying to get it right. And it's a little, you actually asked the exact right question. I don't think we answered it quite fully. Yes, people are used to doing it a different way, specifically on some certain high-end things. But I'm telling you, it wasn't super optimized, and it wasn't safe, and it doesn't scale. So we are trying to, for the platform to work for the long term, for the platform to go everywhere, for those planes to work on every platform. Like there's so many reasons to do what we do. It's not because we're some crazy evil people who want to shuffle something down people's throats. That's not what it is at all. We're trying to make it work for the long term. And it's in the short term, it's change. Change is hard, Processes are established, people are used to something. But I remember the first time we sent our airport tool over to a couple of developers, and this was the first time they saw PBR, physical rendering stuff, and they're like, "What?" Like, trust me, it's good for you. It's gonna look better. It's the modern. It's where they are as a industry, and where we are with rendering, and what's possible now. And it's once you embrace it, you get great results. And ultimately, that's while it might be new, all these people really want. I mean, I know so many people now that have been working on their one plane, their hobby, for 5 years, and all they're in love with the plane. And ultimately, they're going to be so proud once it sits there in all its glory, like full PBR, all the gauges actually work correctly and are not hacked together and all this stuff. It's going to be great for them too. It's just a little bit of a getting used to it process.
I think it's really great that you're acknowledging there that some things you didn't get completely right. But also the fact that you want to work towards getting them right. And also you're willing to take the time to work with developers to kind of show them what you guys do and how they can be better themselves. Because, it's one thing to give everybody the tools to do things, but it's another thing to show them what these tools are and why these tools will be better for them and will make them even more successful and even better people as well. And I think that that's really important, because you can kind of lose touch with that both in this industry and many other industries, where you can give tools to other people, but then you don't get the most amazing thing out of them because they're not using all the tools to their full potential. And you guys have the keys to the tools as well. So being able to do that is really great. And especially, I really like that you butted in there as well, because especially acknowledging every once in a while that you didn't get something right is so important for progress too. Because if you sit there and you say to yourself, I got everything right, then you're never going to be able to look at the mistakes that you actually made and learn from them.
You're never done. Like I would just say, the one thing I know, and that we have an SDK strike team, right? We meet, Seb's in it, I'm in it, and quite a few of us are in it. And the one thing we know for a fact is, I think our tools are actually pretty good now, as Seb said. But communication has not been amazing, right? People are actually, it's the trade-off, right? Do you write the tools, or do you write documentation for the tools? It's a typical classic game engine development type thing.
Yeah.
And we're talking a lot about now, we're going to hire a technical writer dedicated just to basically annotate the SDK and make it clear. And we talked about maybe do ask me anythings with the tools people, so developers can call in and basically ask questions, or we make video. And so we will increase our communication on the SDK, because I think it's kind of an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think an important thing is also, as we said before, like feedback and continue. I mean, it's not something which is over, right? We spent many years listening to reading forums and listening to what people wanted, and this is still continuing. Right? I'm spending, and many people in the team, we're spending hours. I'm spending hours a day watching videos, reading forums. I think we read everything. Everything that is said is read.
Yeah.
And I have a sort of I have a mindset. To me, everybody is somehow right, and I can give you an example. Just a very very simple example. If you look, I don't know, for example, the stall of the 172. Some people will say I should get a drop. Some people are gonna say I should not get a drop. So, for example, we have a CFI here who's, I think, 3,000 hours CFI on a 172. He says should not get a drop. And so my mindset is everybody has to be somehow right, because they are not right. They're not bullshitting. Someone saw it happening like this. And so I spent a lot of time. I talked to a mechanic at the club and the president of the club. And I love it, because one of the oldest instructor at my club said, everybody's right. Sometimes there's going to be a drop. Sometimes there's not going to be a drop. It's going to depend on the temperature, the plane, how the mass is. It's going to depend on, they even told me that when they, every, 1,000 hours or something, they put the plane totally apart, right? It looks like a piece of wood and like a bunch of stuff. And then they put it back together. And there's a tolerance on the elevator. I think on our plane, it's 1 degree up and down. At each plane, you can look it up. There's a tolerance. When they put it back together, if the elevator limits are within the tolerance, they just leave it. And it's going to be a little bit different every time. And so we say, okay, everybody's right. So how can we actually improve the sim so that this reflects? And so this is one of the things which is on our backlog, is to make it so that users can actually configure their plane, so that maybe they have a little bit more elevator authority. Maybe they can now change the CG, and so that they actually get exactly the behavior they want, because everybody's right, but the plane is just different every time. And so we look at everything. Every time someone has something to say, he doesn't think something is right, something doesn't work for him, we always listen, and we always try to understand why he's saying that, what is wrong, how can we improve it.
Right. Yeah, that's dude, was it both of you who kind of had an engineering background, or one of you?
I was a designer guy, producer guy. Seb is the dev. But yeah, it's hilarious. Oftentimes I talk to Seb on phone calls, because we obviously have to sync a lot, and he's literally watching videos, fixing bugs from the videos while we're talking. That's hilarious.
Well, right there, that's like a very big engineering perspective there as well. So in part, you guys have kind of become engineers while making this, is understanding a system and trying to make it better. And that's really important as well, because not only are you making a simulator, but in part, you're actually kind of aircraft engineers, because you're making new aircraft and you're making a bunch of other things.
And the team is that way. Like that's what I would say. So it's funny. Like when we started, we said, we need all the pilot handbooks for everything, and we got them. Like and now it's based on what Seb just said earlier, right? With it going down to the screw. Now we want the maintenance manuals, because that goes down all the way to the screw.
Yeah.
So we talk to all the manufacturers, right? Because we have actually really good relationships. Like, hey, can we get your maintenance manuals? Can we look at that? And I think just this continued willingness to listen and to improve, I think is so key. And as I said, like, and I love what Seb said. Like, every plane's different. Like, drive a car. Cars are different. They're not all the same. You know, they have all their quirks and personalities, and as they get older, they have, you know, their specific things, and we need to embrace that, because ultimately people, they have a certain expectation. For example, how Cessna flies, but it's based on the expectations that they have either from other sims or from the real world. So it's like, okay, we should be able to enable that, right? So they can find the exact sweet spot that they feel right about. And it's not up to us to define that. And it's like, here's the monolithic 172, and every 172 shall fly exactly like this.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be like this, right? So it's like, well, okay, let's write some tools and whatever and put it out there once it's ready.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on two more things before we wrapped up. You know, you're talking about getting all this extra information. Is the end goal to have the default planes that are in the simulator be as true to life as possible?
No. And so I think early on, so it was actually tricky, and it's tricky now. Like, so when you have an ecosystem of third-party creators, their livelihood is actually to make some of these planes. Like, there's only that many Airbuses in the world. There's only that many Boeings. If we end up making every Boeing plane perfect, like what they sometimes call study level, basically just every button does everything, the systems are exactly right, there is no more third party. What are we doing? We're putting these people out of business. So, like, to some degree, we try to get the system right enough, and people can basically get a sense. And honestly, so it was actually a very clear strategic decision we had to make early on. Do we go vertically deep or wide? And given that we're the platform holder, and people saying, hey, can we get helicopters? Can we get gliders? How about water planes? There was all this stuff. We can't go deep and wide. So we said we're going to go wide. And we let the specialists, some people that have worked for like 20 years on certain planes, let them do their thing. They're good at it, you know, and they can spend a team of 7 for 5 years to make an update to the 737, please. And our job is to enable that instead of us hyper obsessing on every button. Then we don't give other people what they want. Like Sergio from Helisimers writes me all the time. Like, and I'm sure Seb, you get emails from him too. And like, so he's so passionate about helicopters, right? Like, we want to give him helicopters. It's just going to take some time. But if we get too distracted on like, oh my God, there's 40 more buttons on the 787, and the autopilot isn't perfectly just like Boeing's, which just seems like impossible to emulate anyways. You can get lost, right? So we try to keep a certain headspace above the depth, right? And don't let the verticals be by specialists.
That's a really great perspective from it, because people always talk about how they want planes immediately, but keeping in mind that also third-party developers are the people that help you guys live is really important. So I really like that perspective. So as I said, I don't want to keep you guys too long because I do want to respect your time. So let's wrap it up with the good old stereotypical, what are you guys most excited for the simulator in its future, and what are you the most excited for people to see and use?
I don't know. Maybe you are gonna want to say this. VR is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
VR is, holy shit, it's amazing. I cannot wait for people to try it and experience it. It's transformative for me. You know, we worked on HoloLens and we worked on a bunch of VR stuff. This is a different one because it's real. Everything feels just real. Like the plane feels real, the world feels real, how you act feels real. It's just, you know, I mean, my favorite, like, it's probably, I shouldn't be saying that, but my favorite VR game is actually from our friend Johnny at Frontier. It's Elite. I think Elite is great.
I love Elite Dangerous.
It's so good. Like, and we worked with Johnny for a long time. Like, I worked with him like 10 years too. But that's, but it's fiction, right? Yes, it's the universe, but the spaceship, it's fiction. Yeah, I've never been in a spaceship. I don't have any muscle memory. Like, what do I do in a spaceship? But with a plane in VR, it is exactly like the real world. It's crazy. Anyways, yeah. So in the near throw, I think Seb is bang on right. I think that's going to be great.
Amazing.
I think another thing is also, I mean, I've seen that over the last years, right? I mean, we've been flying on the planet and the Bing created planet for 3 years now. A really great thing that I've witnessed over time is just the data keeps getting better.
Yeah.
And this is also amazing.
Yeah. I'm geeking out because I get to work with the Bing Maps team a lot, and we're literally in touch with almost every government. And we're talking about, because the governments oftentimes have like great data for their countries. And so we're trying to get better DEM. Obviously we'll get better aerials because we have contracts with like satellite providers and aerial providers and all that. And we send out our pictures, like here's the current sim we just shipped, and here's what we can update whenever we're ready to do that particular world update. And holy shit, it's in some cases is a generation ahead. Like it really is that amazing. Like we have oftentimes our height field is like 5 meters or 10 meters resolution. There's some data coming in right now. It's 25 centimeters.
Wow.
It is crazy.
That's
it looks
insane.
Crazy. So and we're gonna, the nice thing is we're gonna be able to give this away for free. The world updates are free. So that makes me happy. Like every 2 months or so, we're gonna say, hey, here's another place on Earth that's gonna look a lot better. And for me, that means, and so this whole, I'm super excited about these world updates, frankly, because I think we can embrace the place and get people to really go there. Right now, the world's big, and good Lord, I've been to so many countries now in the sim. But then when you point sort of a focus point on something, you say, hey, we've done a bunch of work here. We built some extra airports. We did some landing challenges and some bush trips and this and that, the other. Go experience it. And just seeing that the community will jump in and go to places that I don't believe they've really explored because there was no particular reason to. And I just think that's going to make aviation in those countries better. I think it's going to take people to appreciate other places on Earth better. Because there's so much Central Europe and North America and stuff that so well traveled, people know it. But boy, there are some places where people don't go because the data wasn't good, or there was the previous sims maybe didn't focus on it, right? But we will, and it's going around the Earth again and again and again. As long as we get better data, yes, it's gonna be just great.
Well, guys, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and talking. This is really, I wish that we had a little bit more time because what you just pointed there, that just really excited me because I love to do Alaska flying, and Alaska is kind of rare when it comes to photos and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to you guys releasing some more updates and being able to go to some amazing places. But as I was saying,
we should do this again. Like we're on a journey here. Like we're here for 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.